What up? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And look at you. You done stumbled upon little OTB Saints, where we bring you all the latest black and gold coverage.
Who are the Saints going to draft? Who's going to be their quarterback? What does the salary cap look like? All that information and more.
Hope you enjoy it. Like, subscribe. Nick, neworleans.football is a site. Massive week. We touched on this when me and you talked on neworleans.football about LSU last Thursday. But this is a massive weekend for Louisiana football. LSU's entire season's on the line Saturday morning against Texas A&M. And in a lot of ways, the New Orleans Saints is. I know it's the NFL, right? So mathematically, that is not the case. But it's, in terms of narrative, actual mathematical standings, what the goals are, fan temperature, Nick, this looks like one of the biggest swing games that I've seen in years.
Yeah, I think it's a massive game for them for all the reasons you just said. And look, there's also the human element of it. And I think since the Pittsburgh game last year, and you know, people are probably like sick of hearing this, but it's the truth. Like, you're in there, you feel the temperature, you're talking to people, you know the climate, you can kind of feel things when they're good, you can feel things when they're bad, and when things are teetering, you can definitely feel that. And you know, there's been a few times since that Pittsburgh game last year where it felt like, all right, if they lose another game, this thing's gonna implode. And you know, I feel like they're still right at that point of implosion where if they lose a game, like, people could start turning. And you just saw Matt Canada get fired today because, and one of the things everybody's talking about is player frustration. Like, I think that player frustration exists with the Saints right now. And if they start losing games that they should be winning, and they've already lost some of them, you keep adding to that. At some point, you are going to get to that point where these kind of like subtle things, like early in the season, I think we could all read between the lines of a lot of player comments and kind of feel like, hey, they're talking about play calling, they're talking about coaching, they're talking about lack of accountability. Last year was the big thing. I think that's kind of gotten fixed, but you could read between the lines and know what they're talking about. I think you get, you start stacking things, and at some point someone's going to say, you know what, like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to speak up on it. And then the dam breaks and everything kind of goes from there. So I think it's important from that standpoint. There are 7 games, but I think if you lose this one, all of a sudden people kind of start feeling like, all right, like, this isn't working. We aren't going to get to where we want to go. And it doesn't matter that there's 7. I think the next one is massively huge. So yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think this is a huge swing game for them. And, I think I really do think it's kind of a must win game.
And look, and what's the overcommitment to Pete Carmichael here? Dorsey was awesome in Buffalo last year. They go 5-5. He's fired. He's out. Matt Canada was awful, but the Steelers traditionally never fire anyone. That's always what I hear about. No, Saints ownership, they want to model themselves like the Rooneys, and they want to be very slow to act, et cetera. So the Steelers are 6-4. They just fired Matt Canada. We have continued to harp on the analytical charts that just really visually, depressingly laid out just how poor Pete Carmichael has been from an actual success rate and from, what he's calling, right? Everything that you've been talking about all year long. What's the deal? How are other guys losing jobs and Pete Carmichael's, there's just nothing there?
I want to preface this by saying, I was the person saying it'd be, egregious if they brought him back coming into this season. So that was my take, and I don't think that's really changed. And B, what I'm about to say is explaining their thinking. It is not my thinking. And there seems to be this thing where you'll be like, well, the Saints are in first place, and they're like, well, that's an opinion. And people come at you like, let me preface this by saying I'm just trying to explain their thinking from talking to people and being around the team. So I think it's just I think they feel like they're in a different place than those other teams. Like they look at it like they're in first place and they have 7 games to figure it out. And they feel like they have a chance to make the playoffs, and then you get in the playoffs and maybe you win a game, maybe you don't, but the goal is to get into the playoffs. So I don't think that's a point where they feel like you start tearing things down. I think they think, okay, we have 7 games to figure this out, and maybe we figure it out and everything kind of works in our favor. Like, Buffalo was in a place of urgency, and they also had Joe Brady on their staff, a known commodity who you could at least evaluate and know what he is as a play caller, because there is that on his resume. Sure. I don't really know the Pittsburgh situation well enough to speak on it yet, but I kind of think that they felt like they're in 3rd place and they had to do something to try to shake it up to save their season. The Saints are in a place where they're in first place. Like, are they a good first place team? No. Should they be a first place team? Absolutely not. Like, it feels like they're closer to a last place team than a first place team right now, but that is the reality of the situation. So if you fire Pete right now, it would have to be to a move that specifically makes you better. I don't think this is the point where you throw a Hail Mary. So, like, if they fire Pete and they go to Ronald Curry, maybe Ronald Curry's better, but maybe he's not. There's nothing to evaluate. Like, you can't really know that yet at this point. So I think they feel like they're in a better situation to figure it out and then make a decision after the season. I do think if they don't make the playoffs, everybody's gone. So, I mean, I think that's kind of what's on the table right now. So I think that, there is some temperature on everybody's seat. And if they fall short of that goal, like I think you're looking at a full scale staff change. I don't think it's just one person. I think it's everybody. So I think that's where they're at. And, if they could go get John Gruden right now and have him be the offensive play caller, I think they probably would, but I don't think that's a realistic thing. And then outside of that, where else do you go? So it's not like you can go hire somebody's QB coach right now. Like, you're limited to kind of what's in your building or what's on the street. And I don't know if they see a better option. So for better or worse, this is what they're riding with. It's a decision they made last offseason to stick with them. And, it's going to kind of be what it is. I don't expect any major changes during the season unless, they lose this game and you got Alvin Kamara and, Derek Carr and, Eric McCoy and everybody else like voicing their frustrations. That would kind of have to be what it takes. But right now, I mean, as dumb as it is, they are a first place team and they have a chance to make the playoffs.
I mean, it would be an epic failure if they don't make the postseason. Their remaining record of teams that they're playing combined, 28-43, and that's including an 8-2 Lions team, right? That helps that out a little bit. I mean, what they have down the stretch, I mean, I agree they have to let go of everybody if they don't make the postseason, and it would be a huge failure. I mean, that has to be the bare minimum, right?
It wouldn't just be like, it's not just what's left either. It's what's in the rearview mirror. Like, it's the same thing. It's weak teams, injured players, catching teams at the very best moment and barely scraping and finding a way to get by. Like, they put way too much into this season to not make the playoffs. This is the year to make playoffs. Next year's schedule is a lot harder. You go out, you get Derek Carr, you get Jamal Williams, you make all these moves and you're just the same. You're averaging 2 more points per game this year, which is outrageous. And you added Mike Thomas. Now Mike's injured. Marshawn Lattimore's injured. I would hope those things aren't used as excuses if they fail to meet their goals, because like, you faced everybody at their weakest. Like, you should have built enough momentum to be able to weather a storm. So if you lose your, second or third best offensive player and your best defensive player, massive hit. But like, at this point, like, I don't think it deserves contextualizing, because you've blown way, way, way too many opportunities to build that lead out. So if they don't make the playoffs, I mean, I don't see, like, I think it's a good barometer when everybody's sitting around and they're like, you can't do this again, right? You can't do this again, right? Like, that's when everybody's saying the same thing. Like, at some point, it's plainly obvious that if they don't meet their goals this year, they can't do this again. Like, it would be just insane. So I think at that point, we've heard a lot about player execution. People, the players aren't executing, they aren't doing this, they aren't doing that after every game. It's player execution. Okay, cool. At some point, like, player execution turns into like, what are the coaches doing? Because, Mario keeps screwing something up behind the scenes and everybody's telling him like, hey, you got to fix this, and then he never fixes it. Yeah. At some point, that's on whoever's telling him. Like, you aren't telling him the right way to do it, or T-Bob isn't making the change that has to be made to get that done right. So at a certain point, it becomes T-Bob's fault. So I think we're at that point where it's coaching error. Like, if Rashid Shaheed isn't running the right routes and the ball's, flying over his head, and that's not on it's on Shaheed, sure, but at a certain point, the responsibility shifts to someone larger for not fixing the problem. So then it's on them. Then now, like, I think we're starting to get to the point in this last quarter of the season, or the last third of the season, if the coaching doesn't get better, then it's on the front office. Like, you're putting it on the front office's responsibility at that point. So I don't want to hear about like player execution anymore. Like, the guys have to be doing what they're doing. It's too far into the season. It's a coaching problem now if the players aren't executing. And sure, like Rashid Shaheed or whoever else, Chris Olave, whoever you want to point the finger at, whoever they've been pointing the finger out, like, if they're running the wrong route, sure, it's on them, but it's on somebody else at this point for like not putting the time in with them after practice, or not taking them off the field for screwing stuff up. Like, if you aren't doing the right things, at some point you got to lose your job. So it's beyond the player execution thing to me. Like, it is a coaching problem, and the coaches have to figure out how to fix it.
Well, and one quote that I loved recently from Mickey Loomis is like, there ain't no more like building what sort of team you're going to be at this point. These last 7 games are going to reveal what sort of team you really are. Coming out of the bye, what are kind of the main things that you want to see? Do you have like 1 or 2 goals of what you think you would need to see the Saints get fixed over this last 2-week break?
I think it's all the unfixable things. They got to figure out how to get sacks. Like it's a huge issue, and now Lattimore's not on the field, so I think it becomes an even bigger issue because they're going to have less time to get after the quarterback. Guys are going to be more open, so you got to cut down those windows. And somehow, like the tides have to rise somewhere on the defense. So it's not going to happen with Isaac Yiadom out there in the secondary. So it's on the front. The front can't get there. So I don't think that's going to change. But I think it's a massive, massive problem. It's going to be a massive problem this offseason. And, if we're being real, it's kind of borderline catastrophic failure that we're talking about needing pass rush when they've invested so much in it, starting in 2018. And there just are no answers behind Carl Granderson. And, Cam has, 2 sacks right now? Like, just being realistic, like, you got to have something in the pipeline. I don't think they have anything in the pipeline to make that better going forward. So I think that has to get fixed. I think the offensive line has to block better. I don't think that's going to get cured. Like Trevor Penning's not going to, snap his fingers and figure everything out over the last 7 weeks. So I think you just kind of got to piece together a decent run blocking scheme and try to be 4 yards a carry the rest of the way. We saw it in the last game, so maybe it's possible. So maybe that's okay going forward. And the play calling's got to be just more consistent, more creative, more everything. Like use a little play action. It's crazy that they're last in the league. And they want to be a running team that takes shots down the field. Like if you're a team that takes shots down the field and you run the ball, just like place that little thing in the middle that you can fake it and it helps you take those shots down the field. They don't do it. It doesn't make sense to me. The last thing I kind of wanted, the last thing I think I wanted. Sorry. I know it's crazy. Wild thinking. 2023, who, let's just get the 1994, whatever it was. And the last thing is like I want to see a little more tempo. Like I think they're a little slow in and out of the huddle. Not just talking no huddle, like just straight up like move faster. So I would like to see some of that stuff a little bit, mix it in. I thought in the Bears game, like the thing that kind of saved that game is they went tempo early in the third quarter. They had a good drive. It kind of got things going. I don't think you can. I think fans want them to like overdose on it. I don't think that's the thing you can actually do. I don't think it's realistic or feasible. But mixing it in places where it's kind of unexpected. I think it's something they could do is a change of pace. So just be creative. I mean, that's really it. Just be creative. That's the one thing they can control. They can call plays a little better. They can be a little more creative. They can use a little more motion. All these things, but they don't. And it's been a 2-year-long issue.
What's the latest on the injury report? I know you went into the bye week. You had Lattimore's on there, Derek Carr's on there, Michael Thomas. Looks like he potentially is still doubtful for this game. What's the latest there?
Based on what I hear, I think we're going to see Carr. I think, I don't know. We'll see Lattimore again this season. It's high ankle sprain. I mean, those are 4 to 6 weeks. So I think you're kind of, you're in that. It just kind of depends on how it heals. Maybe you do see him. Maybe you don't. If you do, it might not be until like the very end of the season. And then I guess it would depend if you're going in the playoffs, if you even like try to bring him back at that point. So, and, I think the Mike injury is one too, that's going to be an issue for probably a few weeks. So, we'll see how that goes. It's always hard to get specifics on that situation, but the vague whispers kind of make it sound like it's going to take a little while for him to get back. So expect to see Carr and 2 big injuries, and I think that's something that they got to figure out down the stretch. But again, like they had every advantage coming up to this. So the fact that you didn't build enough momentum to kind of make it less of a factor, that's on them. Like I have no sympathy for the injuries. Usually I'm the guy that's like, no, you got to count in like good players missing time. Like, nah, you squandered too much. Like you should be better than you are right now. So they got to find a way to figure it out.
Nick, what about this last one here, and then we'll get you out of here. LSU question. You texted me over the weekend, and I made sure that I could put your name on it. And I've said it many times, but what's the latest you've been hearing from NFL scouts, like actual NFL scouting circles, about not just Jaden Daniels, but those 2 receivers as well?
Everybody thinks that all 3 of them are going to go in the top 20. I mean,
bro, that's crazy. Explain to everybody thinks. Like, expound on that. Like, who? Like, what do you mean?
People in front offices, area scouts, scouting directors, like everybody I talk to. It's all 3 of them are going in the first round. I've heard top 20 from multiple people. I think Neighbors is his top 10 pick. I think Daniels is. Look, I think Daniels is going to be even higher than everybody said. Like, I think he's going to be a guy as he goes through the process. Like, it's just going to keep going up and up and up. Like, I don't know, like, going back to 17, like Patrick Mahomes around this time, it was like, oh, like maybe the Saints could draft him at 32, and then he's top 10. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jaden Daniels is a climber in the same sense where it's just, I think I think people in buildings are actually having the real conversations, and I think people looking at it are getting caught up and they don't know yet. So I think once they know, like, you'll start hearing that and seeing them go higher in mocks. And, you know, people think Brian Thomas is like an elite downfield player. You know, one person told me he's like one of the best separators down the field that he's seen in years. So I think, I think they're all going to be first round picks. I mean, you know, if you kind of take out like the college scouting internet talk at large and just kind of look at the team, that's what you see. I mean, that's what they are. Like, I don't think scouting's that difficult. Like, these are really good players that are better than pretty much all the other players you're looking at. They should be first round picks.
Yeah. And it's been fun to watch. That is wild, y'all. Nick, thank you so much, man. neworleans.football is the site. Every Thursday I go over there and catch up with Nick and Brooke and Mike Triplett, and they've got an excellent team over there at New Orleans on Football. Been a subscriber for years. You should as well. All the content and get you ready for this Falcons matchup. Nick, thank you, man.
Yeah, have a good Thanksgiving, guys.
Wow, just amazing black and gold takes right there, Jake.
I don't think I've ever heard any takes that are better than the two guys that just gave you that take.
And you can keep getting them by going ahead and liking, subscribing, ringing the bell to get notifications when we post. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next OTB Saints.